The rain came down in sheets so thick that Olivia Barrett could barely see 3 feet in front of her face as she stumbled down the muddy main street of Dallas, Texas, her boots squelching with every desperate step. It was August 1883, and the summer storm had turned the dusty cattle town into a river of mud and misery, matching perfectly the state of her life as she clutched her soaked shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders. She had been traveling for 3 weeks since leaving San Antonio, where her aunt had died of fever, leaving Olivia with nothing but the clothes on her back and exactly 14 cents to her name. Every door she had knocked on that morning had been slammed in her face. The seamstress had no work. The general store needed no help. The boarding house owner had laughed when she asked about employment, saying he needed paying customers, not charity cases. Olivia's stomach had been empty for 2 days, and her fingers were so cold they had gone numb despite the summer heat that lurked beneath the rain. She was 20 years old and alone in a world that seemed determined to crush her into the mud beneath her feet. Through the downpour, she spotted a ranch house set back from the main road, larger than most of the buildings she had passed. A sign hung crooked on the fence post, but she could barely make out the words through the rain. Something about horses and a name she could not read. It did not matter. She was desperate enough to try anywhere, even though she knew ranch work was hard to come by for a woman with no references and no family name to vouch for her character. Olivia pushed through the gate and made her way up the path, her worn dress clinging to her like a second skin, her dark hair plastered to her face and neck. She could hear horses whinnying in a nearby stable, their nervous sounds cutting through the steady drumming of rain on wood and earth. As she approached the covered porch, she saw a man emerge from the barn, his hat pulled low against the weather, his coat collar turned up. She opened her mouth to call out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Swallowing hard, she tried again. "Sir, please, sir, I need to speak with you." The man turned, and even through the rain, she could see his surprise as he took in the sight of her bedraggled form. He was tall, she noticed, with broad shoulders that filled out his rain-dampened coat. He started walking toward her with long, purposeful strides that ate up the distance between them quickly. "What are you doing out in this weather?" His voice was deep, tinged with concern rather than anger, which surprised her. "I need work," Olivia said, forcing the words out even as her teeth chattered. "Any work. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend animals. I am a hard worker, sir, and I do not eat much. I just need a chance." The man had reached the porch now, and as he stepped up beside her, she got her first clear look at his face. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with sharp features softened by kind eyes that studied her with obvious concern. His jaw was strong, covered with a few days' worth of dark stubble, and his hair was the color of rich mahogany where it peeked out from beneath his hat. "You are soaked through," he said, stating the obvious but with such genuine worry that Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. She had not cried through any of this, and she would not start now in front of a stranger. "I will be fine. I just need to know if you have any work available, anything at all." The man studied her for a long moment, and Olivia held her breath, waiting for the inevitable rejection. Instead, he pushed open the door to the house and disappeared inside. She stood there, confused and defeated, wondering if she should leave or wait. Before she could decide, he reappeared holding a thick towel. He handed it to her, and when she reached for it with trembling fingers, he did not let go immediately. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, some unspoken understanding that Olivia could not name but felt deep in her chest. "Stay," he said simply. The single word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Olivia clutched the towel, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Stay," he repeated, firmer this time. "You are in no condition to go anywhere else right now. Come inside, dry off, and we will talk about work once you are not shaking like a leaf in a windstorm." "I do not want charity," Olivia said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was too tired, too hungry, and too cold to have much pride left. "It is not charity if you are going to work for it," the man replied. He stepped back and held the door open wider. "I am Yates Emerson. This is my ranch, and you are going to catch your death if you stay out here another minute." Something in his tone made it clear he would not take no for an answer. Olivia stepped across the threshold, water dripping from her clothes onto the clean wooden floor. She immediately felt guilty about the mess she was making. "I am sorry. I am ruining your floor," she said, trying to dab at the puddles with the towel. "The floor will dry. So will you if you stop apologizing and go sit by the fire." Yates pointed to the fireplace in what appeared to be a modest but comfortable sitting room. "I will get you some coffee and something to eat. Then you can tell me your name and how you ended up begging for work in the middle of a rainstorm." Olivia wanted to protest that she had not been begging, but the word was accurate enough that arguing felt pointless. Instead, she made her way to the fire on unsteady legs, sinking onto a chair that sat close to the hearth. The heat from the flames felt like heaven against her frozen skin, and she wrapped the towel around her shoulders, trying to absorb some of its thick warmth. Yates disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen, and she heard the sounds of him moving about, the clank of a pot, the strike of a match. The house was neat and orderly, she noticed, looking around with curiosity. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything had a place. It was the home of someone who valued order but not ostentation. Books lined a shelf near the window, their spines worn from use. A pair of boots sat by the door, caked with dried mud. A coat hung on a peg, and beside it, a gun belt that made her remember this was still the Wild West, where danger was never far away. He returned carrying a steaming cup of coffee and a plate with bread and cheese. The smell made Olivia's stomach clench painfully. "Eat," Yates said, setting both on the small table beside her chair. "We can talk after you have some food in you." "Thank you," Olivia whispered, taking the cup with shaking hands. The coffee was strong and hot, burning a trail down her throat that felt wonderful. She took a bite of bread and had to force herself not to wolf it down like an animal. She had been raised with manners, even if life had stripped away almost everything else. Yates pulled up another chair and sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He watched her eat with an expression she could not quite read, part concern and part calculation, as if he was trying to figure out what to do with her. "What is your name?" he asked when she had finished half the bread and some of the cheese. "Olivia Barrett," she said. "I am from San Antonio originally. I was living with my aunt there after my parents died of cholera 3 years ago. She passed 2 weeks ago, and I have been looking for work ever since." "No other family?" Olivia shook her head. "No one. My father had a brother somewhere in California, but I have not heard from him in years. My mother was an only child, and her parents died before I was born." "That is a hard road," Yates said quietly. "I am sorry for your losses. Thank you." Olivia took another sip of coffee, feeling warmth slowly spreading through her limbs. "I do not want pity, though. I just want a chance to work and earn my keep." "Fair enough." Yates leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating eyes. "I run a horse ranch here. I breed and train horses, sell them to the army and to ranchers throughout Texas. It is just me right now. I had a hand who helped with the work, but he left 2 months ago to get married and start his own place up in Fort Worth. I have been managing alone since then, but it has been hard keeping up with everything." "What would you need me to do?" Olivia asked, hope flickering in her chest like a candle flame. "Cooking, mostly. Keeping the house in order. I have been living like a bachelor, eating whatever I can throw together between work with the horses. If you can cook decent meals and keep things tidy, that would be worth something. I could also use help with mending tack and washing the horse blankets. Maybe feeding the chickens and gathering eggs if you are willing." "I can do all of that," Olivia said quickly. "I am a good cook. My mother taught me before she died, and my aunt was particular about her meals. I know how to manage a household." "Can you ride?" The question surprised her. "A little. I have ridden before, though not recently. You might need to help me move horses between pastures sometimes. Nothing dangerous, just leading them or riding alongside to keep them moving in the right direction." Yates paused, then added, "The pay would not be much. Room and board, plus a small wage. I could give you the spare room upstairs. It is not fancy, but it is clean and has a good bed." Olivia felt tears threatening again, this time from relief. "That would be more than enough. Thank you, Mr. Emerson. You will not regret this. Call me Yates." Mr. Emerson was my father, and he has been gone 5 years now. He stood up, running a hand through his damp hair. "Let me show you to your room. You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia." Olivia followed him up a narrow staircase to the second floor. The house was larger than it had appeared from outside, with 3 rooms upstairs and what seemed like at least 2 or 3 more on the ground floor besides the sitting room and kitchen. "That is my room," Yates said, pointing to a closed door at the end of the hall. "This is yours." He pushed open the door to a small but charming room with a single window overlooking the pastures. A bed stood against one wall, covered with a simple quilt. A dresser and a washstand completed the furnishings, along with a small chair by the window. "It is perfect," Olivia said, meaning it. After sleeping rough for the past few nights, the room looked like a palace. "I will see if I can find you some dry clothes. My mother left some things here when she and my father moved in with my sister in Houston. They should fit you well enough until yours dry." Yates disappeared into his own room and returned with an armful of fabric. "These might be a bit old-fashioned, but they are clean and dry." He set them on the bed and headed for the door. "Take your time getting settled. When you are ready, come back downstairs and I will show you around the kitchen and the rest of the house." After he left, Olivia peeled off her wet clothes with numb fingers. The dress her aunt had given her was likely ruined, the fabric torn and stained from her travels. She laid it over the chair to dry anyway, hoping it might be salvageable with some work. She dried herself with the towel Yates had given her, scrubbing warmth back into her skin, then examined the clothes he had provided. The dress was indeed old-fashioned, probably 10 years out of date, but it was made of good sturdy cotton in a deep blue color. There was also a clean shift, stockings, and even a petticoat. Olivia dressed quickly, grateful beyond words for the dry clothing against her skin. The dress fit reasonably well, a bit loose in the waist, but nothing she could not adjust with a belt. She found a small mirror hanging on the wall and surveyed the damage to her appearance. Her dark hair was a tangled mess, and her face was pale and drawn. She looked like exactly what she was, a desperate woman who had been living rough. But her eyes, green and determined, still held some spark of life. She would make this work. She had to. Downstairs, she found Yates in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot on the stove. The rain continued to hammer against the windows, but inside the house felt warm and safe. "Feeling better?" he asked, looking up as she entered. "Much better. Thank you for the clothes. They suit you better than they ever suited my mother. She always preferred brighter colors." He gestured around the kitchen. "The pantry is through there. I keep it stocked pretty well since town is a few miles away and I do not always have time to make the trip. The stove can be temperamental. You have to jiggle the left handle to get it to heat evenly. Olivia looked around, taking mental inventory. The kitchen was well equipped if a bit disorganized. Pots hung from hooks on the wall. Dishes were stacked on open shelves. A large table dominated the center of the room, its surface scarred from use. "When would you like me to start?" she asked. Yates looked surprised. "You have had a rough day. I figured you would want to rest." "I would rather work," Olivia said. The truth was that she did not want to give him time to reconsider his offer. If she started making herself useful immediately, he would be less likely to change his mind. "What time do you usually eat supper?" "Around 6, but I can make do with whatever is easy tonight." "Nonsense. You hired me to cook, so let me cook." Olivia moved to the pantry and began pulling out ingredients. There were potatoes, onions, some salted pork, flour, and various other staples. She could make a decent stew with what she had, along with some biscuits if the flour was good. Yates watched her for a moment, then nodded. "All right then. I need to go check on the horses and make sure the barn is secure against this storm. I will be back in about an hour." After he left, Olivia got to work. She found an apron hanging on a hook and tied it around her waist, then set about preparing the meal with practiced efficiency. It felt good to have a purpose again, to be doing something useful instead of wandering from place to place begging for scraps. Her hands moved automatically through familiar tasks, peeling potatoes, chopping onions, mixing biscuit dough. The rhythm of it was soothing, almost meditative. As she worked, she thought about the man who had taken her in. Yates Emerson was not what she had expected. She had encountered plenty of men since leaving San Antonio, and most of them had looked at her with either pity or something darker that made her skin crawl. But Yates had looked at her with simple human concern, as if her well-being mattered to him, despite the fact that they were complete strangers. He was handsome. She could not help but notice, though she told herself firmly that such thoughts were inappropriate. He was her employer now, and she could not afford to complicate things by developing feelings that would not be returned. She needed this job too desperately to risk it. The stew was simmering nicely, and the biscuits were in the oven when Yates returned, rain dripping from his coat. He hung it by the door and pulled off his boots, leaving them on the mat. "Something smells incredible," he said, following his nose into the kitchen. "It is just simple fare, but it should be filling," Olivia replied, stirring the stew. "Supper will be ready in about 15 minutes. That is the best news I have heard all day." Yates leaned against the door frame, watching her work. "You were not lying about being able to cook." "I told you I was a hard worker. So you did." There was warmth in his voice that made Olivia's cheeks flush. She kept her attention on the stew, not wanting him to see her reaction. They ate at the kitchen table, the rain still pouring outside. Yates praised the food effusively, going back for seconds and then thirds on the biscuits. Olivia found herself relaxing in his presence, the tension that had been coiled tight in her shoulders since her aunt's death finally beginning to ease. "Tell me about the ranch," she said between bites. "How long have you been raising horses?" "My father started the ranch about 30 years ago," Yates explained. "He was a cavalry officer before he settled here, and he knew horses. He built it up from nothing, just a few acres and a handful of horses. By the time I was born, it was a proper operation. I grew up in the saddle, learning everything he could teach me. You said your parents moved away after my father took a bad fall from a horse and broke his hip. He could not handle the work anymore, and my mother wanted to be closer to my sister and her family. They left me the ranch 2 years ago. My father died last spring, but my mother is still doing well in Houston." "I am sorry about your father." "Thank you. He was a good man." Taught me everything I know about horses and about running an honest business. Yates pushed his empty plate away and leaned back in his chair. What about you? What was your father's trade? He was a clerk in a shipping office. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable until the cholera epidemic. It took both of my parents within a week of each other. Olivia's voice caught slightly on the words, even after 3 years. My aunt took me in, but she was not well off either. She did sewing work to make ends meet. When she got sick, there was no money for a doctor. That is rough. You have been through a lot for someone so young. I am 20, Olivia said, feeling defensive. I am not a child. I did not mean to suggest you were. Yates held up his hands in a placating gesture. Just that you have faced more hardship than most people twice your age. It takes strength to keep going after all that. Olivia looked down at her plate, not knowing how to respond to the compliment. She was not used to anyone acknowledging what she had been through, much less praising her for surviving it. We should discuss the practical arrangements, Yates said after a moment. I wake early, usually around 5. I would appreciate breakfast by 5:30 so I can get started with the horses. Lunch around noon and supper at 6 like I said. Does that work for you? Of course. Sundays are lighter work. I still need to feed and water the animals, but otherwise it is a day of rest. You would be welcome to attend church in town if you are inclined. I go most Sundays when the weather cooperates. I would like that, Olivia said. It had been weeks since she had attended a service, and she missed the routine of it. They spent the next hour with Yates showing her around the rest of the house and explaining his preferences for how things should be done. He was particular but not unreasonable, and Olivia found herself appreciating his straightforward manner. There was no talking down to her, no assumption that she could not handle the work. He treated her like a competent adult, which was refreshing after so many days of being dismissed or patronized. By the time they finished, exhaustion was catching up with Olivia. The combination of the warm food, dry clothes, and relief of finding work had left her feeling like she could sleep for a week. You look dead on your feet, Yates observed. Go on up to bed. Tomorrow will come early enough. Olivia did not argue. She bid him good night and climbed the stairs, each step feeling like it took tremendous effort. In her room, she changed into the nightgown she found folded in the dresser, another gift from Yates' mother's wardrobe, and collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was soft, the quilt was warm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. She was asleep within minutes, the sound of rain on the roof lulling her into dreams that were blessedly free of worry. Morning came too soon, announced by a rooster crowing somewhere outside. Olivia woke disoriented, taking a moment to remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back, the rain, Yates offering her the towel and telling her to stay, the promise of work and a place to sleep. She sat up quickly, afraid she had overslept, but when she checked the small clock on the dresser, it was only 4:30. She dressed quickly in the blue dress from the day before, splashed cold water on her face from the basin, and attempted to tame her hair into some semblance of order. She still looked thin and tired, but at least she looked clean and presentable. Downstairs, she found Yates already in the kitchen, building up the fire in the stove. "Morning," he said, looking surprised to see her. "You did not have to get up so early on your first day." "You said breakfast at 5:30. I need time to prepare it." Olivia tied on the apron and moved toward the pantry. "What would you like?" "I usually just have coffee and whatever bread is around." "That is not enough for a man who works as hard as you do," Olivia said firmly. She began pulling out ingredients for eggs, bacon, and more biscuits. "You need a proper breakfast." Yates did not argue, just smiled slightly and poured himself coffee. He sat at the table watching her work, and Olivia found his presence comforting rather than intrusive. There was something solid and reliable about him, like a boulder in a storm. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Better than I have in weeks. That bed is very comfortable." "Good. You needed the rest." They fell into an easy silence, broken only by the sizzle of bacon in the pan and the whistle of the kettle. Olivia found herself humming as she cooked, an old tune her mother used to sing. She had not felt like humming in a long time. Breakfast was ready right at 5:30, and Yates ate with the same appreciation he had shown for supper the night before. Watching him enjoy her cooking gave Olivia a warm feeling of accomplishment. It was such a simple thing, but it mattered. She was providing something he needed, earning her place here. After breakfast, Yates headed out to start his work with the horses. "Feel free to explore the property when you get a chance," he said as he pulled on his coat. "Just watch out for the big roan gelding in the far pasture. He is not mean, but he is territorial and might get pushy if you approach his fence." "I will be careful," Olivia promised. She spent the morning cleaning the house from top to bottom. It was not that Yates had been living in filth, but there was a layer of neglect that came from a busy man living alone. Dust coated the furniture, floors needed sweeping and mopping, windows wanted washing. She worked steadily, finding satisfaction in bringing order to the space. Around mid-morning, she ventured outside to explore. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling under a bright sun. The ranch was beautiful, she realized, looking around with fresh eyes. Rolling pastures stretched in every direction, dotted with horses grazing peacefully. The barn was a large, sturdy structure painted red, its doors standing open to let in the breeze. Chickens scratched in a coop near the house, and beyond that, she could see what looked like a vegetable garden, though it was somewhat overgrown. She found Yates in one of the pastures, working with a young horse on a long lead rope. The horse was dancing and prancing, full of energy, but Yates moved with calm confidence, his voice low and soothing as he encouraged the animal through its paces. Olivia leaned against the fence, watching. There was something almost graceful about the way he worked, a partnership between man and horse that was beautiful to witness. He saw her and waved, then brought the horse over to the fence. "This is one of the yearlings I am training. She's going to be a good one once she settles down a bit." "She is beautiful," Olivia said, admiring the horse's sleek coat and intelligent eyes. "Want to pet her?" Olivia reached out carefully, letting the horse sniff her hand before stroking the soft nose. The horse whickered softly, and Olivia felt a smile spread across her face. "She likes you," Yates observed. "Animals are good judges of character. What is her name?" "I have been calling her Dancer, but the buyer will probably rename her. That is how it goes usually." "That seems sad, naming them only to give them away." "It is part of the business," Yates said with a shrug. "But I always try to place them with good people who will treat them right. That matters more than what they are called." Olivia stayed and watched for a while longer, then headed back to start preparing lunch. She made sandwiches with cold beef and fresh bread, along with some pickles she found in the pantry. When Yates came in at noon, dusty and tired, his face lit up at the sight of the food waiting on the table. "You are spoiling me," he said, washing his hands at the sink. "You are paying me to cook." "This is just me doing my job. My previous hand ate hardtack and jerky for lunch most days. This is definitely above and beyond." He sat down and bit into a sandwich, making a sound of appreciation. "I could get used to this." "Good, because I plan to keep feeding you properly," Olivia said with a smile. They ate together, and Yates told her about his plans for the afternoon, more training with the younger horses, checking the fences in the north pasture, and shoeing one of the mares who had thrown a shoe. Olivia listened, fascinated by the details of his work. She had never paid much attention to horses before, but hearing him talk about them with such knowledge and passion made her want to learn more. "Would it be all right if I worked in the garden this afternoon?" she asked. "I noticed it needs some attention and I enjoy gardening." "You do not have to do that. It is not part of your job." "I know, but I want to. It will be nice to have fresh vegetables for cooking." "In that case, feel free. There are tools in the shed behind the chicken coop." Yates stood and stretched, his shirt pulling tight across his shoulders. Olivia quickly looked away, feeling her cheeks heat. "I will be in the north pasture if you need anything." That afternoon, Olivia lost herself in the meditation of weeding and tidying the garden. The soil was good, and with some work, she could see the garden producing well. There were tomato plants struggling under a weight of weeds, bean poles that needed repairing, and herbs that had gone wild but could be salvaged. She worked until her back ached and her hands were dirty, but the garden looked 100 times better. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm after that. Olivia rose early, cooked breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and her afternoons either tending the garden or helping with small tasks around the ranch. She learned to feed the chickens and gather eggs, to tell when the horses needed their water troughs filled, and to recognize the different animals by sight. She mended Yates' shirts when the cuffs frayed, patched his work pants, and kept his boots cleaned and oiled. Yates, for his part, was an ideal employer. He never made demands beyond the basic work they had agreed upon, always thanked her for meals, and treated her with unfailing respect. Sometimes in the evenings, they would sit on the porch together after supper, watching the sun set over the pastures while they talked about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved books, especially histories and adventure stories. That he had been engaged once, but the girl had broken it off when her family moved to St. Louis, and she decided she wanted city life instead of ranch living. That he dreamed of expanding the ranch, buying more land, and raising not just horses but cattle too. She told him about her childhood in San Antonio, about her father's gentle nature and her mother's gift for making any house feel like a home, about her aunt's kindness in taking her in, despite having little to spare, about the dreams she used to have of getting married and having a family of her own, dreams that had seemed impossible during those desperate weeks of searching for work. "They are not impossible," Yates said quietly one evening as they sat watching fireflies dance over the grass. "You are young, Olivia. Your whole life is ahead of you." "Maybe," she said, but she did not feel as pessimistic as she once had. For the first time in a long time, the future seemed like it might hold possibilities instead of just more hardship. 2 weeks after Olivia arrived, Yates asked if she wanted to go to town with him. He needed to pick up supplies and talk to a rancher about a horse sale, and he thought she might enjoy getting out of the house for a bit. "I would like that," Olivia said, pleased by the invitation. They took the wagon into Dallas early on a Saturday morning, the horses' hooves clopping rhythmically on the packed dirt road. The town was busier than it had been on that rainy day when Olivia had arrived, with people crowding the wooden sidewalks and horses tied to every hitching post. Yates helped her down from the wagon, his hand strong and steady under her elbow. "The general store is just there," he said, pointing. "I need to meet with Bill Carson about some horses, but I should be done in about an hour. Will that give you enough time to get what you need?" "More than enough. I just want to pick up a few things for the kitchen." "Get whatever you think we need. I trust your judgment." He handed her some money, more than she would need, and headed off toward the saloon where he was supposed to meet Carson. Olivia made her way to the general store, enjoying the bustle of town after 2 weeks of quiet ranch life. She picked out flour, sugar, coffee, and some spices that would improve her cooking. She was examining a display of fabric, thinking she might make herself a new dress with her first wages, when she heard a woman's voice behind her. Well, if it is not Yates Emerson's new housekeeper. Olivia turned to find three women regarding her with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. The one who had spoken was in her mid-30s, dressed in an expensive green dress that was probably the height of fashion in Dallas. "Hello," Olivia said politely. "I am Olivia Barrett." "Margaret Fleming," the woman said, looking Olivia up and down in a way that made her feel like livestock being evaluated. "These are my friends, Susan Hart and Dorothy Mills. We were all very surprised to hear that Yates had hired a young woman to work at his ranch." There was an implication in her tone that made Olivia's spine stiffen. "Mr. Emerson needed help with the household while he focuses on his horse training. I was fortunate to find the position." "I am sure you were," Margaret said with a thin smile. "It must be quite convenient living alone with an unmarried man." "It is a job, Mrs. Fleming, nothing more." "Of course, dear. I am sure that is exactly what it is." Margaret exchanged glances with her companions. "We just wanted to introduce ourselves. Dallas is a small town, and people notice things. I would hate for your reputation to be damaged by any misunderstandings." The threat was barely veiled. Olivia felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Thank you for your concern, but my reputation is my own business." "Good day, ladies." She turned back to the fabric, dismissing them. She heard Margaret sniff with displeasure, but the women moved away, their whispers following them. Olivia's hands shook as she selected a length of plain brown cotton, the most practical and affordable option. She paid for her purchases and left the store, her good mood thoroughly soured. Yates was waiting by the wagon, loading bags of grain into the back. He took one look at her face and frowned. "What happened?" "Nothing. Just some unpleasant women in the store, let me guess. Margaret Fleming." Olivia nodded, surprised he knew. "She is always spreading gossip and making trouble," Yates said, shaking his head. "Do not let her get to you. Half the town knows to take anything she says with a pound of salt. She implied that there was something improper about me working at your ranch." Yates' jaw tightened. "That is ridiculous. You work for me, you have your own room, everything is completely respectable. I know that, and you know that, but she made it clear that people are talking. Let them talk." Yates helped her up into the wagon with perhaps more force than necessary, his anger evident. "I know the truth, and so do you. That is all that matters." But as they drove back to the ranch, Olivia could not shake the worried feeling that had settled in her stomach. She had been so focused on surviving, on doing her job well, that she had not considered how their arrangement might look to outsiders. Dallas was a small town, and reputation mattered. If people started saying things about her, it could make it impossible for her to ever find other work or make a life here. That night, she lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. She knew she should probably look for a different position, something that would not expose her to gossip. But the thought of leaving the ranch, of leaving Yates, filled her with an ache she did not want to examine too closely. Somewhere along the way, in between cooking meals and watching sunsets and listening to Yates talk about his dreams, something had shifted. She looked forward to seeing him each morning. She found herself watching for him to come in from the pastures, her heart lifting when she heard his boots on the porch. She noticed things about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his hands when he worked with the horses, the sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him. She was developing feelings for him, real and deep feelings that went far beyond gratitude for a job. And that was dangerous, because he was her employer and she was his housekeeper, and there was no way those feelings could lead anywhere good. The next few days were strained. Olivia tried to maintain the easy companionship they had developed, but she was too aware now of her own feelings, too conscious of every glance and word. Yates noticed her withdrawal and seemed hurt by it, which only made her feel worse. On Wednesday evening, as she was cleaning up after supper, Yates came into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. "Did I do something wrong?" Olivia looked up from the dishes, surprised. "What? No, of course not. You have been different since we went to town. Distant. If Margaret Fleming said something that bothered you that much, you can tell me. It is not that." Olivia set down the plate she had been washing, her hands dripping soap suds. "Or not exactly that. Then what is it?" She looked at him, at the genuine concern in his face, and something in her broke. She was tired of being alone with her worries, tired of trying to figure everything out by herself. "I have been thinking that maybe I should look for a different position," she said quietly. "One that would not expose either of us to gossip. It is not fair to you to have people saying things because you were kind enough to give me work." Yates stared at her for a long moment. "Is that really what you want, to leave?" "No," Olivia admitted. "But I do not want to cause problems for you either." "You are not causing problems. Margaret Fleming causes problems. Gossips cause problems. You work hard. You do excellent work, and I would be a fool to let you go because some bored women have nothing better to do than speculate about my household." He pushed off from the counter and moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Unless you want to leave, if you are unhappy here, that is different." "I am not unhappy," Olivia said. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "I have never been happier, actually. That is part of the problem." "How is being happy a problem?" She looked down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. "Because you are my employer and I am your housekeeper, and I should not be feeling—" She cut herself off, horrified at what she had almost admitted. "Feeling what?" Yates' voice was soft, and when she dared to glance up, his expression was intent, focused entirely on her. "Feeling things that are not appropriate," she whispered. Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he cupped her cheek with his hand, his touch gentle. "What if I told you I have been feeling things that are probably not appropriate either?" Olivia's breath caught. "What?" "From the first moment I saw you standing in the rain, looking so lost and so determined at the same time, I felt something. I told myself it was just sympathy, that I was helping someone in need. But these past few weeks, watching you bring life back to this house, sharing meals and conversations and quiet evenings, I have realized it is more than that." His thumb traced a soft line across her cheekbone. "I care about you, Olivia, not as an employer cares about an employee. As a man cares about a woman. But I work for you," Olivia said, even as her heart soared at his words. "Then you are fired." "What? You are fired?" Yates repeated, a smile tugging at his lips. "As of right now, you no longer work for me. That way, when I do this, it is completely appropriate." He leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet, his lips warm against hers. Olivia melted into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. It was her first kiss, and it was everything she had ever dreamed a kiss could be. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "You cannot fire me. Who will cook for you?" "I suppose I will have to convince you to stay for other reasons," Yates said, his forehead resting against hers. "I am falling in love with you, Olivia. I know it has only been a few weeks, and maybe that is too fast, but that is how I feel." "It is not too fast," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have been falling in love with you too. I tried not to, but I could not help it." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms wrapping around her and pulling her close. Olivia felt like her heart might burst from happiness. All the hardship, All the desperate days and frightening nights had led her here to this moment, to this man. It felt like fate. When they finally broke apart, Yates kept his arms around her, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. "I know this complicates things. The gossips will have more to say." "Let them say it," Olivia replied, echoing his words from the trip to town. "I do not care what Margaret Fleming thinks. That is my girl." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips again, soft and quick. "We will do this right. I will court you properly, take you to church socials and dances, make sure everyone knows my intentions are honorable." "What are your intentions?" Olivia asked, smiling up at him. "To marry you if you will have me. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you are ready, when you are sure." His eyes searched hers. "I want a life with you, Olivia. I want to build something together here on this ranch. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me and go to sleep every night the same way. I want children with you, and grandchildren, and a whole life full of days like the ones we have shared these past few weeks." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I want all of that too." "Then it is settled. We will take our time, do things properly, and to hell with anyone who has something negative to say about it." They sealed the agreement with another kiss, and then another, until Olivia was laughing and pushing him away. "You should let me finish the dishes. Leave them. Come sit with me on the porch instead." Hand in hand, they went outside and sat on the porch swing, watching the stars come out. Yates kept his arm around her shoulders, and Olivia leaned against him, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. "Tell me something," Yates said after a while. "That day when you came here in the rain, if I had turned you away, where would you have gone?" Olivia was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I do not know. I was at the end of my resources. I suppose I would have tried a few more places, and when those failed, I might have just started walking. Maybe I would have tried to get to California to find my uncle, though I had no money for the journey." "I am glad you came here," Yates said, pulling her closer. "I am glad I was home that day, glad I looked up and saw you, glad I had the sense to ask you to stay." "So am I." Olivia tilted her head up and kissed his jaw. "You saved my life that day. You gave me hope when I had none left. You gave me something too. This house felt empty before you came. Now it feels like a home." They sat together until the night grew cold, reluctant to go inside and end the perfect evening. But eventually, Yates walked her to the stairs and kissed her good night, proper and chaste, before heading to his own room. Olivia fell asleep with a smile on her face, her fingers touching her lips where he had kissed her, already counting the hours until she would see him again at breakfast. True to his word, Yates courted her properly over the following weeks. He took her to church on Sunday and made a point of introducing her to people as the woman he was courting, not as his housekeeper. Let Margaret Fleming make what she would of that. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. He taught her to ride properly, patient and encouraging as she gained confidence. He took her to a dance in town and waltzed with her while half of Dallas watched, making it clear to everyone that she was his. Olivia bloomed under his attention. She had never felt so valued, so cherished. Every day brought new moments of joy, stolen kisses in the barn, hands held under the dinner table, quiet conversations that lasted late into the night. They talked about everything, learning each other's stories, dreams, fears, and hopes. 3 months after that rainy day when she had arrived at his door, Yates proposed. They were out riding, checking the fence line in the east pasture, when he pulled his horse to a stop on a ridge overlooking the ranch. "I want to show you something," he said, dismounting and helping her down. He led her to a flat spot where you could see for miles in every direction. "My father used to bring me here when I was a boy. He said this was the best spot on the whole ranch because you could see everything from here, past and future all at once." Olivia looked around, understanding what he meant. You could see the house where they lived, the barn where they worked, the pastures full of horses. But you could also see undeveloped land stretching toward the horizon, full of possibility. "I have been thinking about the future a lot lately," Yates said, taking her hands in his. "About what I want, what I hope for, and every vision I have includes you. I do not want to court you for a year or 2 years. I want to marry you, build a life with you, grow old with you. I know we have not known each other that long, but I have never been more certain of anything." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, modest but beautiful. "Olivia Barrett, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children? Will you stay with me, not because I asked you to that first day, but because you want to?" "Yes," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. She laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed with happiness. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Olivia kissed him back with all the love in her heart. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church in Dallas. Yates' mother came from Houston, along with his sister and her family. Olivia had no family to invite, but Yates' family welcomed her so warmly that she felt like she had gained the family she had lost. Some people in town whispered about how fast the courtship had been, how scandalous it was that they had been living under the same roof before marriage. But most people were happy for them, and even Margaret Fleming had the grace to wish them well, though her smile did not quite reach her eyes. The wedding night was gentle and sweet, Yates patient and tender as he introduced Olivia to the physical side of love. She had been nervous, but his care and obvious love for her made it beautiful instead of frightening. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they would now share every night, Olivia felt a sense of completeness she had never imagined possible. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, running his fingers through her loose hair. "I am thinking about that day in the rain. How desperate I was, how hopeless I felt, and how you changed everything with a single word." "Stay," Yates said softly. "Stay," Olivia repeated. "The best word I ever heard." "Stay with me forever," Yates said, kissing her temple. "Forever," Olivia agreed. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Running a ranch was hard work, and there were setbacks: a mare that miscarried, a drought that dried up one of the water sources, a broken bone when Yates was thrown from a particularly stubborn horse. But they faced everything together, and the challenges only seemed to strengthen their bond. Olivia continued to manage the household, but now as a wife rather than an employee. She took pride in making their house a home, in keeping Yates well fed and cared for, in creating a place of warmth and love. She also got more involved with the horses, learning to help with training and even accompanying Yates when he went to show horses to potential buyers. She made friends in town, women who appreciated her warmth and her willingness to help others. When she learned that the local school needed help, she volunteered to teach reading to some of the younger children. She remembered her own mother's emphasis on education and wanted to pass that gift along. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Yates one evening after supper, nervous about how he would react. His response was to let out a whoop of joy and spin her around the kitchen, exactly as he had when she accepted his proposal. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Yates placed his hand on her still flat stomach with reverence. "A child, our child, created from love." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia was sick for the first 4 months, barely able to keep anything down. Yates was worried constantly, hovering and fussing until she had to shoo him away so she could rest. But his concern was endearing, a sign of how much he cared. As her belly grew, Yates became even more protective. He insisted she rest more, stopped letting her do heavy work, and brought her endless glasses of water and whatever food she could stomach. Olivia found his overprotectiveness both annoying and touching. Their son was born on a cold December night, arriving 3 weeks earlier than expected. The labor was long and difficult, and there were hours when Yates paced outside the bedroom, terrified that he was going to lose either Olivia or the baby or both. But Dr. Patterson, who had come from town, was skilled and experienced, and just after midnight, a baby's cry filled the house. Yates was allowed in to find Olivia exhausted but glowing, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "It is a boy," she said, smiling at him through happy tears. "We have a son." Yates approached slowly, almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red face of his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving one impossibly small fist in the air. "He is perfect," Yates breathed. "You are both perfect." They named him James, after Yates' father, with a middle name of Owen after Olivia's father. Little James was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them both exhausted and delighted in equal measure. Yates took to fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else, changing diapers and walking the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night without complaint. Watching Yates with their son made Olivia fall even more in love with him, something she had not thought possible. He was so gentle, so patient, so clearly devoted to both of them. Sometimes she would catch him just looking at James with an expression of wonder, as if he could not believe this miracle was real. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Yates' reputation as a horse trainer spread, and he had more business than he could handle. They hired a young man named Thomas to help with the work, and then another named Ben, when Thomas proved so successful that they needed more hands. Olivia managed the household and helped with the books, discovering she had a talent for numbers and organization. When James was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter Ruth arrived on a beautiful spring morning with far less drama than her brother's birth. She had Olivia's green eyes and Yates' dark hair, and she was loved fiercely from her first breath. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. James and Ruth grew, surrounded by horses and open spaces and parents who adored them. Olivia and Yates' love deepened with time, growing from the passionate romance of their early days into something richer and more comfortable, though no less powerful. They had their arguments, of course. Yates could be stubborn, and Olivia had a temper when pushed. But they learned to talk through disagreements, to compromise, to put their partnership first. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality horses and fair dealing. Sometimes on quiet evenings, Olivia would sit on the porch where Yates had first kissed her and think about how far she had come. From that desperate young woman begging for work in the rain to this a wife, a mother, a partner in a thriving business. It seemed almost impossible, like a dream. But it was real. The ring on her finger was real. The children playing in the yard were real. The man who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world was real. One evening, when the children were in bed and she and Yates were sitting together watching the sunset, Olivia voiced these thoughts. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life," she said. "That I am this lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Yates replied, pulling her close. "You were brave enough to keep going when things were hard, brave enough to ask for help, brave enough to take a chance on a stranger who offered you a towel and told you to stay. Best decision I ever made, Olivia said. Second best, Yates corrected. The best was saying yes when I proposed. That was not really a decision. My heart had already decided long before you asked. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. After a few moments, they heard small footsteps and James appeared in the doorway. "Papa, Mama, can I sit with you?" the 6-year-old asked. "Of course, come here," Yates said, making room. James climbed up between them, and Ruth, never wanting to be left out, soon appeared as well. They all sat together, a family, watching the day end and the stars begin to appear. "Tell us the story," Ruth demanded, "about how you met." It was her favorite story, one she never tired of hearing. Olivia and Yates exchanged a smile. "Well," Olivia began, "it was a rainy day and I was looking for work." She told the story as she always did, emphasizing the rain and her desperation and how brave she had tried to be. Yates chimed in with his perspective, talking about seeing this bedraggled but determined young woman and knowing somehow that his life was about to change. "And then Papa gave Mama a towel and told her to stay," James said, having heard the story enough times to know all the beats. "That is right," Yates confirmed. "Best decision I ever made." "And then you fell in love and got married and had us," Ruth added. "Exactly right, sweetheart," Olivia said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "I want to fall in love someday," Ruth announced. "You will," Yates told her, "when you are much, much older, not for many, many years." James made a face. "Love is silly." "You will change your mind about that eventually," Olivia said with a laugh. "Trust me." When the children were finally asleep in their beds, Olivia and Yates returned to their own room. As they got ready for bed, Yates caught Olivia's reflection in the mirror and stopped to look at her. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "I am just thinking about how beautiful you are, how blessed I am. After 2 children and years of hard work, I am not the young woman you met anymore." "No," Yates agreed, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "You are better. You are the mother of my children, my partner, my best friend. You are the woman who made this house a home and my life complete. That rain-soaked girl I met was beautiful, but the woman you have become is breathtaking." Olivia turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring all her love into it. Even after years of marriage, his words could still make her heart race. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too. Forever." As they climbed into bed, Olivia thought once more about that rainy day. About how close she had come to missing this, to walking past this ranch and trying somewhere else. About how one moment, one decision, one word stay had changed everything. She had stayed. She had built a life here, a family, a future, and she would never regret it, not for a single moment. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of seasons. James grew into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did, often following Yates around the ranch and asking endless questions about training and breeding. Ruth was more adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring, keeping Olivia in a constant state of worry and amusement. When James was 10 and Ruth was 7, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This third pregnancy came as a surprise, as she had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. She was 33 now, and while that was not old, it was older than many women were when they had their last child. Yates was thrilled, though also worried. "Are you sure you want to do this again?" he asked, remembering how difficult her pregnancies had been. "Want does not really factor into it at this point," Olivia said with a laugh. "But yes, I am happy about it. One more child to love." This pregnancy was indeed harder than the previous 2. Olivia was tired all the time, and her body ached in ways it had not before. Dr. Patterson, now gray-haired and closer to retirement, checked on her regularly and advised rest. Their third child, another boy they named Samuel, was born on a stormy October night. The labor was faster than with the other two, but the baby came out not breathing. Olivia watched in horror as Dr. Patterson worked frantically, clearing the infant's airways and rubbing his tiny chest. The moments that passed felt like hours, the silence in the room deafening. Then Samuel let out a wail, and everyone in the room seemed to breathe again. Dr. Patterson wrapped him quickly and handed him to Olivia. "He is going to be fine. Just gave us all a scare." But Samuel continued to give them scares. He was a sickly baby, prone to fevers and breathing problems. Olivia and Yates took turns sitting up with him through countless nights, rocking him and praying he would grow stronger. There were times when they thought they might lose him, when the fever would spike and Samuel would become listless and unresponsive. But Samuel was a fighter. Slowly, over his first year, he grew stronger and healthier. By his second birthday, he was a sturdy, happy child who rarely got sick anymore. The experience had aged both Olivia and Yates, leaving them more aware of how fragile life could be, but also more grateful for every day they had together as a family. James, now 12, took his role as big brother seriously, especially with Samuel. He was protective and patient, teaching the toddler to feed the chickens and identify different horses. Ruth, at 9, was less interested in baby care but loved making Samuel laugh with her silly faces and games. The ranch continued to thrive. They had expanded their operations, buying adjacent land when it became available, and now ran cattle alongside the horses. Thomas and Ben were still with them, now married with families of their own living in houses on the ranch property. It had become a real community, with Olivia at its heart, organizing gatherings and helping the other families when they needed support. Olivia had also become involved with the church, organizing charity drives for families in need and visiting the sick. She remembered all too well what it was like to have nothing, to be desperate and alone. She made it her mission to ensure that no one in Dallas went without help if they needed it. One day, a young woman showed up at the church, thin and bedraggled, asking for work. She reminded Olivia so much of herself that it was almost painful. The woman's name was Catherine, and she had been traveling alone after her family died in a fire. She had no skills except basic household work, no references, and no money. Olivia did not hesitate. "Come with me. I know someone who might need help." She brought Catherine to a widow in town who had been struggling to maintain her home alone. Mrs. Morrison was initially reluctant, but Olivia vouched for Catherine and offered to pay her wages for the first month out of her own pocket. It was the start of a beautiful friendship, and Catherine thrived under the arrangement. When Yates heard about it, he smiled. "You have a soft spot for young women in distress." "I remember what it feels like," Olivia said simply. "If I can help someone else the way you helped me, then I should. That is one of the many reasons I love you." As the children grew older, the dynamics of the household shifted. James at 15 was already as tall as his father and working alongside him as a full partner in the ranch operations. He had his father's gift with horses and his mother's head for business. Ruth at 12 was proving to be an excellent rider and had declared her intention to start training horses herself, much to Yates' pride and slight concern. Samuel at 5 was the joy of the household, sweet-natured and curious, always asking questions and trying to help with everything. He followed his older siblings around like a duckling, adoring them both. Olivia watched her children grow with pride and a touch of melancholy. They were becoming independent, needing her less and less. Soon James would be thinking about marriage, and Ruth would not be far behind. The house that had once been full of the sounds of young children would grow quieter, But she still had Yates, and their love had only grown stronger with time. They had been married for 15 years now, and Olivia loved him more than she had on their wedding day. He was her rock, her partner in everything, her best friend and lover. They still sat on the porch together in the evenings, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still found reasons to steal kisses when the children were not watching. One anniversary, Yates surprised her with a trip to San Antonio. They left the children in the care of Thomas and his wife, and took the train south, staying in a hotel and spending 3 days just being together, without the responsibilities of the ranch or family. Walking through the streets of San Antonio, Olivia found herself thinking about the girl she had been when she lived here, before cholera took her parents, before hardship and loss shaped her into someone harder. That girl had been softer, more naive, with no idea what life had in store. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked Yates as they walked hand in hand through the plaza. "All the time," he admitted. "If you had gone to a different ranch that day, if I had not been home, if I had turned you away. Every choice, every moment could have led us in different directions. But we found each other anyway. That has to mean something. It means we were meant to be together," Yates said, pulling her close. "I believe that. No matter what roads we traveled, we would have ended up in each other's lives somehow." "You are a romantic," Olivia teased. "Only with you." They made love that night in their hotel room with the freedom of not having to be quiet, not having to worry about children overhearing. Afterward, lying in Yates' arms, Olivia felt like a young bride again, full of hope and possibility. Back at the ranch, life continued its steady march forward. James turned 18 and began courting a girl from town named Alice, the daughter of the banker. She was sweet and sensible, and Olivia approved, though it was strange to think of her firstborn as old enough for marriage. Ruth at 15 was as wild as ever, insisting on breaking horses alongside her father and the ranch hands. She had no interest in the domestic arts, much to Olivia's amusement. "She is like you," Yates said, "independent and strong. She knows what she wants." "I hope she finds someone who appreciates that," Olivia said. "She will. She has time." When James announced his engagement to Alice, Olivia cried happy tears. Her baby was getting married. The wedding was planned for the following spring, and Olivia threw herself into preparations, enjoying having a project that reminded her of her own wedding all those years ago. The ceremony was beautiful, held at the church in Dallas with half the town in attendance. Watching James and Alice exchange vows, Olivia held Yates' hand tightly, remembering their own wedding day. Time had passed so quickly. It seemed like just yesterday that James had been a baby in her arms, and now he was a man starting his own family. "We did good," Yates whispered to her. "We did," Olivia agreed. James and Alice built a house on the ranch property, and within a year they had given Olivia and Yates their first grandchild, a girl named Emma. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Olivia was overwhelmed with emotion. The circle of life continued. New generations being born, families growing and changing. Ruth eventually married as well, though not until she was 22, choosing a young horse trader named Michael who could keep up with her adventurous spirit. Samuel, now a teenager, showed no interest in marriage yet, more focused on his studies. He had proven to be the scholar of the family, loving books as much as his father did. As Olivia entered her 40s and then her 50s, she watched the ranch transform into a true family legacy. James took over more and more of the operations, though Yates still worked every day, unable to fully retire from the work he loved. Ruth and Michael had their own small ranch nearby, raising horses and a growing brood of children. Samuel went away to study at a university in Houston, then returned to help manage the business side of the ranch operations. More grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and laughter during family gatherings. Olivia loved being a grandmother, spoiling the little ones in a way she had been too busy to do with her own children. Yates was equally smitten, always having a grandchild on his knee or following him around the ranch. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children organized a large celebration, inviting everyone from miles around. Olivia stood beside Yates as people toasted them, praising their successful marriage and the family they had built. She felt Yates' arm around her waist, solid and reassuring as always. "Thank you," she whispered to him during a quiet moment. "For what? For everything. For seeing me that day in the rain, for asking me to stay, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for saying yes," Yates replied, kissing her temple. "To staying, to marrying me, to every day of the past 30 years. You made my life worth living." They danced together that night, slower than they once had but no less joyful. Watching them, their children smiled, knowing they had been given a gift, the example of a marriage built on love, respect, and partnership. It was a legacy as valuable as the ranch itself. As they grew older, Yates' hair turned silver and Olivia's dark locks became streaked with gray. Their hands developed the roughness and spots of age, their movements became a bit slower and stiffer. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that had never dimmed. Yates' mother passed away when they were in their late 50s, and Yates grieved deeply for the woman who had raised him. Olivia held him through his sorrow, as he had held her through hers so many times over the years. They buried her beside Yates' father in the family plot on a hill overlooking the ranch. A few years later, Olivia had a health scare that left both of them shaken. She collapsed one day while working in the garden, and the doctor diagnosed her with a heart condition. She had to slow down, rest more, let others take over tasks she had always done herself. It was hard for Olivia to accept her limitations, but Yates was firm. "You have spent 35 years taking care of everyone else. Let us take care of you for a change." So she rested, spending her days on the porch or in the sitting room, surrounded by visiting children and grandchildren. She taught the granddaughters to sew and cook, passed on recipes and stories, and watched life unfold around her with contentment. Yates, too, had to slow down. His knees bothered him, legacy of too many years of hard ranch work, and he could no longer ride the way he once had. But he still went out to the barn every day, still supervised training, still had that special connection with the horses that had defined his life. They celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just family, with a dinner at the big house. Olivia looked around the table at her children and grandchildren and felt overwhelming gratitude. This was what she had built. This was the life that had sprung from that desperate day in the rain when a kind man had handed her a towel and told her to stay. In her 70th year, Olivia's heart finally gave out. She died peacefully in her sleep, Yates beside her as he had been for 45 years. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Texas, testament to the lives she had touched and the community she had helped build. Yates grieved deeply, lost without his partner. But he found comfort in his children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together. He lived 3 more years, still going out to the barn every day, still watching the horses in the pastures, still sitting on that porch where they had shared so many evenings. When Yates passed at 75, he was buried beside Olivia on the hill, their graves marked with simple stones. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, but everyone who lived there knew the story. How it had all started with a young woman desperate for work, a rainy day, and a single word that changed everything: stay. The grandchildren told the story to their own children, and those children told it to theirs. The ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to the love of two people who had found each other when both of them needed it most. Years became decades, and decades became a century, but the story lived on. In Dallas, there was even a historical marker placed at the ranch, commemorating the Emerson family and their contributions to the development of Texas ranching. Tour guides would tell visitors about Yates Emerson and his wife Olivia, about how they had built one of the most successful horse ranches in the state, but also about the love story that had started it all. The house still stood, lovingly maintained by each generation. The porch where they had courted remained, where couples in the family would sit and watch sunsets, continuing a tradition that Olivia and Yates had started so long ago. The barn had been rebuilt and modernized over the years, but a small plaque inside commemorated the original structure where Yates had worked when Olivia first arrived. In the family cemetery on the hill, Olivia and Yates rested side by side, their stones weathered by time but still readable. Fresh flowers appeared regularly, placed by descendants who still honored their memory. On anniversaries and special occasions, family members would gather at the graves, sharing the story once more, making sure it was never forgotten. Because it was more than just a story about two people falling in love. It was a story about hope in the face of desperation, about kindness extended to a stranger, about how a single moment of compassion could ripple forward through time, creating families and communities and legacies that lasted forever. It was a story about staying, about choosing to remain even when things got hard, about building something together that was stronger than what either could have built alone, about love that deepened with time rather than fading, that weathered storms and hardships and emerged even more beautiful. And it all started with rain, a towel, and a word that changed two lives forever: stay.